Colorado Territory, late summer of 1872, the wind had teeth that morning, slicing through the cottonwoods along the riverbank as if it meant to cut the world apart. Brielle Carson stood barefoot in the doorway of her cabin, rifle in one hand, her son's small fingers wrapped tight around the other. She watched the dust trail rising fast from the east. A rider was coming, and she knew too well what kind of men rode this far west without sending word first. She pressed her boy behind her leg and raised the rifle. The rider veered off the trail before reaching the fence. He did not come closer, just reined his horse in and lifted both hands to show he held no weapon. He turned his horse and rode back the way he came. Brielle let out a breath she had been holding too long. "Go inside, Wesley." The boy nodded and disappeared into the cabin, his dark curls bouncing as he ran. Brielle followed, bolting the door. She leaned the rifle against the wall and looked around the small one-room cabin. The stove was cold, no time this morning to light it. The bread was stale, the beans nearly gone. Her hands went to her hips, her thoughts running too fast. She needed to hunt, needed to check the traps near the creek, but she could not leave Wesley alone. Not after the last time. He was only 6, but he had the kind of eyes that saw too much. She had spent every day since her husband died trying to keep his world small safe. But the prairie did not care about safe, and it sure as hell did not care about her grief. That night, while Wesley slept curled beneath the quilt she had stitched from scraps of her husband's old shirts, Brielle sat by the fire, rubbing the ache from her hands. The wind howled across the plains, carrying with it the sound of coyotes and, farther off, something heavier. She stepped outside, rifle in hand. A man stood near the edge of the trees, tall, still, painted face and long black hair tied back. He did not move. Brielle aimed the rifle. "You lost." He did not answer. His eyes, dark and steady, met hers unflinching. "I have a child," she said, voice sharp. "If you mean trouble, I do not," he said. His voice was low, calm. "You are alone." She did not lower the rifle. "You know that from spying. I watched," he said. "You needed help." "I do not need anything from you." His head tilted slightly. "Then why do you shake?" Brielle realized her hands trembled against the wood of the rifle. She stepped back, slammed the door, and dropped the bar. Inside, the fire cracked, the only sound in the room. She pressed her back to the door and sank down, breathing hard. The next morning, the man was gone, but by the creek, 3 of her traps were reset. 2 held rabbits. Her water barrel, which had leaked for weeks, had been patched with pine tar, and someone had stacked fresh wood beside the door. She looked around the trees but saw nothing. No tracks, no sign. Wesley tugged her sleeve. "Did you fix the barrel, Mama?" "No," she admitted. "Someone else did." "Was it the man from last night?" She knelt beside him. "You saw him?" Wesley nodded. "He looked at me, but he did not smile." Brielle touched his cheek. "If you ever see him again and I am not with you, you come inside and lock the door. Do you hear me?" He nodded again. That night she did not sleep. Not truly. She sat in the rocking chair with the rifle across her knees, listening to the wind. The 3rd night he came again. She saw him through the window, standing by the fence. She stepped outside before she could think better of it. "You keep showing up," she said. "I saw white men ride this way," he said. "I followed. They did not reach your home. You scared them off." His nod was slight. "You are Comanche," she said. "Yes," her fingers clenched around the fabric of her skirt. "Why help us?" His eyes found hers again. "Because you are alone. There are plenty of people out here alone, not like you." Silence sat between them. "Then what is your name?" she asked. "Waukomis," he said. "My mother was Comanche. My father was taken in war. They raised me among both." She stared at him, unsure what to say. "You do not trust me," he added. "No," she said, "but I do not think you mean harm." He nodded once, then turned back toward the trees. "Wait," she said. He paused. "Why not come in, just for a meal?" He looked toward the cabin. "The boy would be afraid." "He is not the only one," she said. A faint breath of a smile crossed his face, but he did not step closer. "Maybe next time," and then he was gone. Weeks passed. Waukomis returned every few days, never asking for anything, never staying long. He showed Wesley how to set better traps, how to move quiet through the woods. Once he brought dried meat. Another time he left a bundle of herbs on the porch, wrapped in buckskin. Brielle started sleeping easier. Not because she trusted him, but because when the coyotes came too close or strange riders passed near, they never reached her door. Waukomis was watching. One evening, as the sun dipped low, she found him by the creek. Wesley was with him, crouched beside a rabbit snare. "He listens well," Waukomis said. "He always has," she replied. Wesley held up the rabbit with pride. "I did it just like you showed me," Waukomis nodded. "You will eat tonight." Brielle looked at him. "You could come to supper," he hesitated. "For Wesley," she added. "He wants to thank you." That night, Waukomis sat at their table. He spoke little, but his presence filled the room. Wesley leaned against him as he ate, and for the first time in months the boy laughed. After Wesley was asleep, Brielle walked him to the door. "He likes you," she said. "I like him," Waukomis said softly. She hesitated. "And me?" His eyes met hers. "You are strong, too strong to carry everything alone." She felt her throat tighten. "I am afraid." "I know," he said, "but I am not." She watched him disappear into the trees again. But her heart did not feel as heavy as it once had. Not anymore. The first frost came early that year, frosting the tops of the buffalo grass and turning the cottonwood leaves brittle and gold. Brielle laid the last of the summer tomatoes on the windowsill, hoping they'd finish ripening in what little sun was left. Inside, the air smelled faintly of smoke and boiled cornmeal. The cold brought silence with it, a hush that pressed against the cabin walls at night. Wesley had grown quieter with the season, his play more thoughtful, his questions sharper. He no longer asked if his father was coming back. Instead, he watched the horizon like someone waiting for something else, something that didn't yet have a name. Late one afternoon, Waukomis arrived on foot, leading a mule with 2 bundles tied across its back. He studied the sky before approaching the cabin with a steady, unhurried gait. Wesley opened the door before Brielle could stop him. Waukomis raised a hand. "I found the mule wandering east of the ridge, no marks, no one claimed it." "You think it was abandoned?" Brielle asked. "I think someone died," he said. She stepped outside, her shawl pulled tight around her shoulders. "You brought the packs." "I opened one," he said. "It held flour, canvas, a tin of coffee. The other is yours to decide." Wesley had already climbed atop the split-rail fence to pet the animal's neck. "Can we keep him?" "If no one comes before snow," Waukomis said. "He's yours." Inside, they unpacked the supplies. The second bundle held a worn Bible, 2 women's bonnets, and a child's toy horse carved from pine. Brielle held it in her hand a moment before setting it aside. "No one's coming back for this," she said. That night, Waukomis stayed longer than usual, seated by the fire with his legs folded beneath him. Wesley dozed on a pallet near the stove, the toy horse clutched tight. Brielle poured 2 cups of the dark, bitter coffee and handed him one. The firelight caught the sharp lines of his face, the faint scar beneath his jaw she hadn't noticed before. "How did you get that?" she asked. He touched it without looking. "I was 12. I told a man he was wrong to strike his wife." Her mouth tightened. "Did he answer you?" "With a blade," he said, but he did not raise his hand to her again. She studied him. "You always speak careful, like you're measuring every word." "I was taught words are arrows." "You only loose them if you mean to strike." She sipped her coffee, watching the shadows shift across the far wall. "Did you ever have a family of your own?" "I had a woman once," he said quietly. "Before the war with the Utes, she died giving birth." The child didn't breathe. The silence that followed was not heavy. It was the kind that softened things, that made even pain feel like a shared blanket. "I'm sorry," she said. He nodded, eyes on the flames. "I buried them on a ridge where the wind never rests." She reached for a log and added it to the fire, careful not to wake Wesley. "Do you miss your people?" she asked. "I walk between," he said. "I am not one thing, not the other." She thought of the way he moved, the way he watched everything without speaking. "That must be lonely." "It is," he said. "Until now." She met his gaze then. There was nothing hurried in it, nothing uncertain. Just the quiet knowing of two people who had carried too much for too long. Later, as he stood to leave, she followed him out. The air had turned sharp, the moon bright enough to cast shadows across the yard. "I'll ride north tomorrow," he said. "Check the old trail near the canyon. Will you come back before the snow?" "I will come back," he said. She stepped closer. "You don't have to keep standing outside." He didn't answer at first. Then, "I know," she reached out, fingers brushing his. "I want you to." His hand closed around hers, warm and solid. He looked down at her and his voice was soft. "Then I will." He walked away into the moonlight, his shape swallowed by the dark. But this time, Brielle didn't feel the cold as she watched him go. The snow came in slow drifts at first, softening the world without warning. Brielle woke to a sky the color of pewter and a hush outside so complete it felt like the earth had stopped breathing. She pulled the quilts tighter around Wesley and added a stick of wood to the stove, careful not to let the cold bite too deep into the cabin. Waukomis had not returned yet. She didn't worry, not at first. He moved with intention, never rushed. But by the fourth day, when no sign of him marked the tree line and the mule grew restless in the lean-to, her unease scratched just beneath her skin. Wesley sat at the table, whittling a stick into the shape of a bird. "Mama, did he get lost?" Brielle twisted a length of thread around her fingers. "No, he's not the kind of man to lose his way." The boy nodded once, then turned back to his carving. By the sixth evening, with the wind sharp and dry as bone, she saddled the mule and wrapped Wesley in every blanket she could spare. She lashed him to her back with her husband's old coat and rode south, following the ridgeline where the grass still showed through the snow in patches. She found tracks near the canyon deep, narrow prints half filled with ice. They led downslope into a narrow gully where the snow thinned under the cedar trees. The mule stopped suddenly, ears forward. There, half hidden by rock and brush, Waukomis lay still beside a broken branch. His shoulder was wrapped in a torn strip of his own tunic, soaked through. His face was drawn, skin sallow with fever. Wesley slid down and knelt beside him. "He's breathing." Brielle pressed her hand to Waukomis's forehead, just barely. She didn't waste time asking what happened. She cleared space in the packs, lifted him with effort, and settled him across the mule's back. Wesley steadied his legs while Brielle walked beside, leading the mule slowly over ice and loose stone. By the time they reached the cabin, dusk had settled and the cold bit hard at her cheeks. She made a bed near the stove and stripped the soaked cloth from his wound. A bullet, clean through the shoulder, crusted with dried blood and dirt. Wesley handed her the tin of lard and clean muslin. "Will he die?" "No," she said, steadying her voice as she cleaned the wound. "Not here." Waukomis drifted in and out of sleep for 2 days. When he finally opened his eyes, the wind had settled and the sun was low through the frost-glazed window. "You found me," he rasped. Brielle dipped the cloth into warm water. "You left a trail even I could follow." He tried to sit up. She pressed him gently back. "Don't be foolish." He looked past her toward the corner where Wesley slept curled in the quilt. "I didn't want him to see. He's not a child in his heart anymore," she said. "Not after all this." Waukomis let out a breath, more sigh than speech. "There were 2 men, taking meat off another man's trapline. I told them to leave. They didn't." She changed the cloth without flinching. "It doesn't matter now, you're here." He watched her hands, her quiet movements. "You could have left me. You knew I wouldn't." His eyes lingered on her face. "I hoped." By the next morning he sat upright, weak but aware. Wesley handed him a carved bird, the wings rough but shaped with care. "I made this for you," he said. Waukomis turned it in his hand. "It flies fast." "It's a kestrel," Wesley said. "They don't give up easy." The man nodded, then looked to Brielle. "Is he always this certain?" "Only when it matters." Later, when Wesley stepped outside to fetch water, Waukomis leaned back against the woodpile and said, "I dreamed of that creek by the cottonwoods. You were there." She stirred the beans gently. "What was I doing?" "Waiting." She turned toward him. "You don't have to dream it anymore." He held her gaze, something quiet and final in his expression. "If I asked to stay, not just through winter, what would you say?" "I'd say I've been waiting too." He reached for her hand, calloused and warm beneath his. "I would build you a better roof, one that doesn't leak in spring." "I'd let you," she said, voice low. "But only if you let me choose the curtains." He smiled, not wide, just enough to crease the skin near his eyes. "Then we'll have to make them together." Wesley returned, arms full of kindling. "There's deer sign out near the rise." Brielle took the wood and ruffled his hair. "We'll track them tomorrow, all three of us." Wesley looked up at Waukomis. "You're not leaving," the man met the boy's eyes. "Not anymore." There was no grand word spoken, no moment of drama, just a shared breath between them and the quiet certainty of something that would hold. Outside, the snow had stopped. Inside, the fire burned steady, and the silence was no longer something to fear. By late November, the ground held the cold even through midday, and the sunlight had a brittle edge to it. The cabin had taken on a different rhythm. There were 3 mouths to feed now, and 3 sets of hands tending to the work. Brielle found herself waking before dawn not out of fear, but habit, and finding Waukomis already outside most mornings, splitting wood in the hush before the snow began to fall again. She watched from the window once, the way he moved with quiet purpose, his coat patched at the shoulders, his breath in clouds. He hadn't spoken of returning to his people, nor had she asked. Something had settled between them, not spoken, but understood. That afternoon, she mended a tear in Wesley's trousers while the boy sat on the floor sketching a map in the ash beside the stove. "Where's this lead?" Waukomis asked, crouching beside him. "To a cave," Wesley said. "Where the wind can't find you and there's deer bones stacked high like a castle." Waukomis studied the lines. "You think it's real?" "I don't know," Wesley said, "but I like thinking it is." Brielle set the mending aside. "He's always had ideas." His father used to say the same thing. "This boy's got one foot in the world, the other in a place no one else can see." Wesley glanced at her, eyes flicking down again. "He never said that to me." "He meant to," she said softly. Later, while Wesley napped, Waukomis stepped out back with her to check the smoked venison. The lean-to they'd built together held up well, the roof angled just right to keep the snow from piling too heavy. "You've let me stay long," he said, tying the flap closed. "But I should ask. Do you want me here still?" She picked a piece of dried meat from the string and broke it in 2. "If I didn't, I'd have told you." "That's not the same," he said. She handed him a piece. "Then I'll say it plain. I want you here not just as help, not because I'm afraid. Because I wake up easier knowing you're near." He chewed slowly, watching the sky. "You've built something strong here." "I tried," she said, "but strong things can be lonely too." He turned toward her. "I've had women look at me with caution, with pity. Never with what you're giving me now." "What am I giving you?" she asked. "Place," he said, "and choice." She pulled her shawl tighter around her arms. "You've always had choice, you just didn't always have someone waiting on the other side of it." Inside, Wesley stirred. She moved to go, but Waukomis caught her wrist gently. "If I asked to marry you come spring, when the thaw loosens the ground and the birds come back, would you wait for that?" She looked down at his hand, rough and warm against her skin. "I wouldn't wait. I'd start now." "And keep going." He lowered his hand, but his eyes held hers. "Then I'll build you a room for your sewing, and one for the boy with shelves for books. He'll need them if he's going to map caves that don't exist yet." She smiled then, the kind of smile that belonged to the part of her she'd tucked away all these years. "And where would we sleep?" He stepped closer, just enough that she could feel the heat off his body. "Where it's warmest." That night, Wesley curled between them beneath the quilts, his breath even and soft. Waukomis reached across the boy's back, fingers brushing hers beneath the blanket. "Do you think he'll remember this?" he asked softly. "He'll remember the quiet," she said, "the safety. He'll remember not being afraid." Waukomis nodded. "Then we're doing right." She turned her face toward him. "We are." Outside, the wind whispered low through the trees, but inside the cabin, the world held steady. The fire crackled, The boy dreamed, and the two of them lay side by side, not waiting for another season to begin, but already living in the one they'd chosen together. The thaw came slow, crawling into the seams of the land like it wasn't sure it belonged. The snow receded in patches, leaving behind the heavy scent of wet earth and long, buried grass. Brielle knelt in the garden bed with her sleeves rolled to the elbow, turning the soil with her fingers. The ground was still cool but pliable. She dug her hands in deeper, feeling for roots for the start of something better. Wesley stood a few yards off, knotted string between his fingers, measuring a straight edge for the rows. "How many beans should we plant?" he asked. "As many as we can eat," she said. "And a few more to trade," he nodded, drawing a line with the heel of his boot. "He said he'd build a fence after the ground softened." "He will," she said, brushing dirt from her palms. "He always does what he says." Waukomis returned at dusk, a brace of pheasants slung over one shoulder and a leather satchel tied shut with hemp cord. He set the birds by the door and stepped onto the porch without a word, watching her finish the last row. She didn't rise. Just brushed her hair back with the back of her wrist and looked up at him. He untied the satchel. "There's a man near the river who's part Kiowa. He married a white woman and makes tools from scrap. I traded him a length of sinew and 3 strips of smoked meat. He gave me this." She took the wrapped bundle from him, peeled back the cloth. Inside lay a carving knife, the blade clean, the handle whittled from hickory and banded with rawhide. She ran her thumb along the spine of it. "It's balanced," she said. "He said it'll hold an edge for years." She met his eyes. "You didn't need to go that far." "I wanted to," he said. "You're always cutting with dull things." She walked past him into the cabin, set the knife on the shelf beside the flour tin, and lit the lamp. The wick flared, casting a warm spill of amber across the floorboards. "I got word from the rancher east of the river," he said, stepping inside. "He's selling off his back pasture, 30 acres, and there's a stream." She turned. "We can't buy land." "He'll trade," Waukomis said. "He needs help breaking the ground, building a corral. Said he'd take labor for the first year's worth." She stared at him, then crossed the room and rested her hand on the table's edge. "And after the first year," she asked. "I'll find ways," he said. "I've lived close to the land my whole life. You've kept this home going through worse than hunger. If we do it together, it's ours." Her voice came quiet. "You want to move?" "No," he said. "I want to grow. That land gives us that chance." Wesley pushed open the door, dirt on his knees and a small blue feather in his hand. "There's a bird nesting under the eaves." "We'll leave it be," Waukomis said. "It chose this place." That night they ate in the warmth of the cabin, the shutters drawn against the wind still lingering from the mountains. After Wesley had gone to sleep, curled beneath a fresh quilt Brielle had sewn from leftover muslin and wool, Brielle poured water into the basin and pressed a cloth to Waukomis's neck, dabbing away the dust of the trail. "You always come back with more than you left with," she said. He caught her hand and held it between both of his. "I come back to you." She looked down at their hands, then at him. "You said spring. It's here." He stood, reached into the small chest by the hearth and drew out a narrow band of braided silver wire. "I traded for this last fall," he said. "I've been carrying it since." Her breath caught. He didn't kneel, didn't need to. "I want to build a life," he said. "Not just survive it, with you, with Wesley, if you'll have me." She stepped forward, her voice steady. "There's no one else I'd walk into the next year with. No one else I'd let carry the weight with me." He slid the band over her finger. It fit like it had waited for her. They were married 3 days later, beneath a stand of cottonwoods just budding into green. The preacher from town rode out, and the neighbors who could spare the day came with bread and preserves. Wesley sat on Waukomis's shoulders as they all walked back to the cabin, his hands clutching the man's hair like reins. That summer they planted the new ground. Brielle worked the rows with her skirts tucked up, dirt beneath her nails. Waukomis built the fence with cedar rails and steady hands. Wesley carried water from the stream and learned to tie knots strong enough to hold a calf. They kept chickens, and in late August, a neighbor offered them a heifer in trade for 2 sacks of cornmeal, and a month of Waukomis's time mending fence. Brielle took to churning butter again, and Wesley began copying words from the old Bible onto scraps of hide. One evening, as the sun lay low across the hills and the scent of warm earth hung thick in the air, Waukomis and Brielle walked the edge of the field. The corn had come in tall, the beans thick with pods. He reached for her hand. "This land belongs to no one before it belongs to us," she nodded. "And now," he looked at her, his voice quiet, "it knows our names." They stood there a long time, the wind brushing through the cornstalks around them, the light turning everything to gold. Behind them, smoke curled from the chimney. A boy's laughter called across the field, and two lives once carved hard from loss leaned instead into something steadier, not perfect, but whole. And in a world that had taken more than it gave, they had made a place that stayed. A place where love was not spoken often, but lived, every hour, every season, without fear.